place was built in a year and a half. It has 3.7 million square feet of office space. And as you know, when you read the little brochure advertising this concept that we're going to be talking about today, that's only 2.9 million that the Army's looking for. Here's 3.7 million, and we did it for $49.6 million. That's the other thing I want you to think about. Times have changed just a slight bit. Okay. I'm here to be sure you know that the senior leadership of the Army is solidly behind this proposal. I'm Director of the Army Staff, and I'm bringing you the best wishes of Secretary Shannon and the Chief of Staff of the Army, General Sullivan, who are both intimately readying on the background and the planning that's led to getting to a pre-solicitation conference as we're having today. It's a special set of legislation that allowed us to be even embarking on what we're doing. One time, one site, very unique, but there's lots of win-win inherent when you look at the potential for this. And you'll get into those kind of details as we go along. But it is a potentially incredible opportunity right here in the shadow of the nation's capital to do something very, very meaningful for our long-term livelihood in terms of housing people in office space and also promoting a diverse community in a major part of the Northern Virginia area. A lot of thought and work have gone into it, but we recognize it as unique and challenging, so lots of input is going to be solicited from you as we try to sharpen what kind of feasible way to proceed. Our host this morning for this is Mr. Paul Johnson. Paul Johnson is the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army for Installations and Management and the Environment. Long-term professional here in the business. And I think they have a very interesting laydown for you here this morning, and I know there'll be tons of questions, and we look forward to being able to entertain those. So thank you for your interest and your willingness to be here, and we look forward to hopefully embarking on a great adventure to bring about change at the Engineer Improvement Grant. Paul Johnson. Thank you very much. Okay. Y'all have a good morning.
Thanks again for coming out to introduce some folks here that I'm sure you know, but I would like to introduce Joe Stevens and his staff. He's from the Program Director of Military Construction, Office Chief Engineer. Milt Hamilton and Peter Stein from the Administrative Office. Paul Sistolini from OSD. Will Bowman from the Bowman, Prost, and Basel contracting firm who helped us put this together. Now, like Joan Donnelly said, this is a very unique undertaking. We went to Congress and got special legislation so that we could pull this off. We're trading some very valuable land for some top of the art, state-of-the-art administrative space that the Army needs, and at the same time we'll be able to get out of some lease space and do some consolidation. This is going to be a design build, sort of an arrangement. It's going to be a partnership. We want to be sure that you understand this at the outset, that you're a big partner in this, and we'll have to work together very closely to make this come about. And we last time we had a meeting of this sort was about 10 years ago when we decided to build Fortress Drum. Some of you were here. I see some people who were here at that time, and that was a great undertaking, and it was strictly a partnership sort of an arrangement also. Now, to go through the program and tell you basically what it's all about, I have Mr. Hardiman here, who is our program manager, and I would like to introduce him now to start the program.
Thanks, BJ. Everybody hear me? As PJ said, I'm Bob Hardiman. I'm the program manager for this particular project. And what I'm going to do is lay down for you what we're talking about and how we're going to go through this affair. The concept is simple: to sell, trade, or lease rights to get the Army out of lease space in the National Capital Region into Army-owned space at the Engineer Proving Ground. And no capital construction cost to the Army for its space. Now, for those of you that do not know where the Engineer Proving Ground is, let me give you an orientation of what we're talking about. Across of the interstates, the Capital Beltway with I-95, 395, and Springfield is here. The Newington Interchange is here. We're 16 miles southwest of Washington, D.C. To the west of I-95 is the Engineer Proving Ground. Note it's shaped about like a map of the United States. When we speak of doing work at the Proving Ground, we've got to look at a couple of things. And one of those, of course, is your environmental aspect. Your environmental aspect is covered by an EQC that's roughly T-shaped, centered on the Accotink Creek, which is one of the amenities of the site. It drops 100 feet from north to south. And this particular site has been approved by the Environmental Protection Agency, Region 3, and Fairfax County. The next aspect, of course, is transportation. When you look at transportation in the National Capital Region, or Washington, D.C., or as some people say, within 500 miles of it, what you're really talking about is how do we get people on and off the site so that we don't cause more congestion. First, let's talk about these items here. Going back to the map again, the Franconia-Springfield Parkway portion of the Fairfax County Parkway has already been completed over to Beulah Street. HOVs on I-95 extending 27 miles south to Quantico Creek are currently being worked on, and I-95 south has a ramp which falls in on Backlick Road immediately in front of the Proving Ground, 1,000 feet south of the north entrance. Backlick Road itself is being widened to 4 lanes along the front of the Proving Ground and up into Springfield. Franconia-Springfield Metro Station, located here, is in fact going to come online in 97-98. The Virginia Railway Express, if you recall, that's the rail line that runs up and down to Fredericksburg, in this particular case, is due to come online in 95. What we are going to do as part of the development of the Proving Ground, not part of this first phase, but as part of the total development of the Proving Ground, is to put in a people mover or monorail system from the Proving Ground over to the metro station. Now, a monorail is a monorail. If you've been to Disney World in Florida, we're talking about a monorail system such as this. The question is, when you look at a system like that, what impact does it have on the area? Superimposing this on the skyline in Springfield, you see the monorail there. It is a non-obtrusive type device. It is not a case of building another bridge that blocks the sunlight and raises ire or raises specters, if you will, of the loops in some of our more infamous or famous cities like Chicago and New York in terms of having that in. The type system we're talking about will come off the Proving Ground along this purple line into the metro station and will be part of what will eventually be a county Army type people mover system that goes through the Springfield Central Business District and over through the Springfield Mall, tying back into the transportation center. So when we get finished, we will have access to the Metro Center, which is also a bus transfer point, which is also a railroad point, which will also be a point that you can transfer over to the Proving Ground. This negates a great deal of the traffic that we are concerned with, primarily because of the numbers of our people, particularly in the federal office, that live to the south and southwest of the Proving Ground. Paul Johnson's already referred to this. This is public law that gives us unique, continuing, permanent authority to the Army to try to do this for the Engineer Proving Ground. Now, as many of you know, we've got 20 million acres of land just in the continental 48 United States that something similar could be done at. So this one's being looked at with a great deal of interest by members of the administration as well as Congress. We're talking about office, hotel, residential development with convenience retail only. It makes no sense to put in another retail mall in Springfield, because there's already the Springfield Mall and some 630 plus shops in the Springfield Central Business District. We are going to do it in phases, and we're here to talk to you today about phase one. Obviously, the reason is that in terms of that, the succeeding phases will take on greater value as we build the first, second, third phases. The Army has agreed and will stay in charge of the master planning for the entire development throughout the period of time to ensure that the development conforms with the agreements we reach with the county. It will take 10 to 15 years to develop what the Army wants to put on the site, 15 to 20, an additional 5 to complete the private development portion of it. We've had it valued at $1.5 to $2 billion for the total site with what we want to put on it. Our timeline, we are now at the particular point in time where we're having the developers pre-solicitation conference, 23 August. We intend to issue the CBD notice for the RFP on 30 September 93. And as PJ said, this is a design-build type affair, which will extend through February 94, we make the award, through September 96, because we want to bring our first building for the Army online on October 96. Obviously, this is not business as usual. This is not a MILCON project. It's not a military construction project. And for those of you that have asked, this does reflect the downsizing of the Department of Defense. It does reflect the downsizing of the Department of Defense, which we predicated for this particular project to be 33% in this area. So our strength is based on that. We are phasing it. We're phasing it to reduce the impact on the local economy, and we are emphasizing the retail that's available in the Central Business District and the Springfield Mall. What we're offering is the rights to do these things in this area, shown in yellow. That's the northeast corner of the proving ground. Starting on the left, this will eventually be a 4-lane road, but during phase one will only be required to be built to 2. This is a 2-lane road coming across the northern portion and basically follows the alignment of the existing 2-lane road, with the exception in this area the road is shifted 500 feet to the south. This would be a 4-lane requirement in this particular case, with a 2-lane feeder coming in from Backlick Road at this point. Again, the area we're talking about is this area shaded in yellow for the first phase of the development. That's approximately 145 acres on which this would be built in addition to the Army's 700,000 square feet of space. We've got our conceptual environmental impact statement for the proving ground. We are going for our formal county approval. We have informal county approval for the project at present time for phase one. We have said that we would provide anchor tenants in the form of other DOD agencies to take up part of that 1.5 million square feet of space. Approximately 1.1 million square feet of that first 1.5 million square feet of private office space would be taken up by some DOD agencies with long-term leases. Solicitation, we're going to go to formal solicitation procedures. There will be an 8-month period of time of pre-development to do the analysis, programming, designs, and negotiations. What we're looking for, as we told you in the market survey, is we're not looking for grandiose type submissions. What we're trying to do is we're trying to get an idea of your grasp of what we're into, your conceptual design for the particular project, what your capability is, how you plan to maximize the financial benefit to the Army, and then to see what your understanding of the project is that we are trying to put on the ground. We are saying, and we acknowledge this up front, that the Army is willing to share the risk. We haven't done this before, but we are planning on doing it now in this particular project. Do I have any questions? Sir, if you'd stand up. If you'd stand up, please, so we can hear you.
Are you going to give handouts to the presentation out?
The question was, are we going to give handouts to the presentation? The answer is no, because as you came in, we gave you a copy of the market survey and all the information is contained therein. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on the detail of the RFP, what you're going to be requiring? Are you going to be offering to compensate for the amount of effort put into the RFP by the various teams?
Question was, to elaborate more on the RFP, and are we going to offer to compensate for the effort put into by the various teams? The answer to that question is no. I'm not offering to compensate for anything. I'm looking for you to provide me money and come up with an effort to do that. We spell that out on the 5th and 6th pages of the market survey, that we don't therefore expect elaborate submissions in that particular case. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
You mentioned the figure 1.5 to 2 billion in your slide. Did that refer to infrastructure improvements, or is that your estimate of the value of phase 1?
No, sir. What that is, that's the estimate of the total project itself when it's finished. At the end of 15 to 20 years in $1993, the value of the entire development would be 1.5 to $2 billion.
Is that spelled out anyway? Is that detailed anyway?
That's just an estimate that was given based on what we said we wanted to put on the site. No, it's not. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Are you going to have a detailed section M in the RFP? Is it going to be standard, or is it going to be like a A&E 224?
Let me refer the questions. Are we going to have a detailed section M in the RFP, or are we going to have a standard A&E 224? I'll refer that to Jerry Rifkin to answer that.
Yeah, we will follow source selection procedures following the Section M of the Uniform Contract Format. Will not be using the Brooks Act in their AE selections. Will not.
Yes, sir.
Master planners.
Stand up, would you please? Stand up, would you please?
The master planners that you've been using, did you elaborate on who they are, what they've done, and whether they'll be allowed to participate in this portion?
Question is about the master plans we've been using and whether or not they will be allowed to participate. What we've been using is Basil Bauman Probst Associates. Will Bauman is here, and no, they will not be allowed to participate in subsequent phases. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
How long for the proposal submittal? If you're going to submit, if you're going to request RFP in September, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, what?
Question was how long for proposal submittals. We plan to actually put the RFP on the street in the second, third week of October and ask for those to be completed and submitted to us by the 31st of December. Yes.
What are the agencies that you're considering bringing in, and how will those lease rates be negotiated?
The question is, what agencies are we considering going in, and how will those lease rates be negotiated? The answer to the question is they would be negotiated. The Army agencies that we're moving in are basically Army Materiel Command and Military Traffic Management Command. And by that we refer to the buildings that they currently occupy. So although they may be the bigger tenant in there, you'll find a number of our other tenants in there. I think you're really referring to the DoD tenants, and we are looking at moving Defense Information Systems Agency and Defense Nuclear Agency. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Lyman, a point of clarification on the question regarding Basil Bowman Probst. It's the entire team, correct, that is excluded from participating, not just Basil Bowman Probst?
The question is whether or not the entire team or just Basil Bauman Probst is excluded from participating. I'm going to refer that back to Jerry Rifkin, again from contracting.
I guess, are you referring to principals of the firm, the consultant?
No, I was referring to all the supporting consultants, Carson, Hoff, Roadside, and Harwell, all of the original Basil Bowman Probst team that participated in the original 3 years ago study.
I guess my answer would be we'll have to look and see what the level of interest is by those entities.
Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Bob, what is the, tell me a little bit about risk. What parameters you talking about there?
Well, in this particular case, the question is what about risk and what are we talking about sharing? In this case, the issue at hand is that we have got the land to develop, and we are in fact going to provide some tenants for that. If in fact we have a developer who does not perform, then we're left holding the bag, and what do we do in that particular case? There is no issue in this case if somebody goes belly up on us as to how are we going to figure out a way to solve that particular issue. We got a piece of land that we're trying to basically leverage into some office space for the Army itself. Jerry, you want to add to that?
Environmental, what are you going to do about that?
Environmental, you get a clean site. Question is, what about environmental?
You retain the liability?
We retain the liability for the environmental. Yes, sir.
Is the initial RFP going to include the monorail transaction?
Question is the initial RFP going to include the monorail transaction? The answer is no. Yes, sir.
Could you elaborate on the other infrastructure components that will be involved in this development? Water, sewage, power, anything like that involved?
Everything. Question is, elaborate about the other infrastructure requirements that are going to be involved in it. Water, sewer, power, roads, everything. Someone else? Yes, sir.
You mentioned that the conceptual EIS is done. You did that, number one, and then how are you going to do the remaining EISs?
I'm sorry, you said the conceptual EIS is done?
I think that's what you said.
Yeah, and your question was who did that?
Right.
The Army did that. That's done. That's finished. And the remaining environmental will be environmental assessments, which we will do. Yes, sir.
But the nature of the agency, some of the agencies you mentioned that might be tenants, is there going to be any requirement for security tank space?
Yes, that will be spelled out in the RFP. The question was about security tank space. Is there going to be any? And yes, and that'll be spelled out in the RFP. Yes, sir.
Is your intention to maintain the same development for all phases? You're going to reselect each phase?
The question is, are we going to maintain the same developer for each phase, or are we going to reselect at each phase? At present time, because this is a competitive type action, we're going to reselect at each phase. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
How long of a lease term is the Army going to be willing, and the associated agencies be willing to take out?
The question is, how long will the lease term be, and how long will we be willing to take out? That's subject to negotiation. What are you giving? What's the best deal you give to us? Gentleman in front of you had a question? Yes, sir.
Yes, and I think the last page of your, next to last page of your spec, it says, the Army has established a general level of quality that it wishes to achieve in the project. It has developed a set of design guidelines and material specifications. I wondered when those might be available for us.
The question is, what about our quality statement, and what are the guidelines, when will they be available? The answer is that they will be available at the time we issue the RFP. Anybody else? I'll close by saying to you that we've not done this before, and particularly not in this way. There is no such thing as a dumb question, and there's never too many questions that you can ask us about this. We've asked you if you have any specific questions that we didn't cover here. We've given you comment sheets with an address on them to send them up to contracting at Baltimore District. We would appreciate it if you put them in there. We do need, in order to respond, either your business card stapled to that form or a legible company address and name so we can get back to you. We look forward to answering your questions. Yes, ma'am. Sid? Yes, sir.
This brief summary of the uses says Army space 700,000 gross and private office space 1.5 million gross. These lead tenants that you speak about, those are part of the 1.5?
That's correct.
And what percentage of the 1.5 do you anticipate that to be?
1.1 out of 1.5. Anyone else? Another question back here.
Do you plan on publishing attendees lists so that team efforts can be created among all attendees?
It is not my intent to publish an attendees list at the present time.
Is there a chance you might reconsider?
We will reconsider it.
Normally, certainly this is not a pre-proposal conference, and normally a pre-proposal conference, industry tends to be shy about telling who's here, letting the competition know. But if you have no problems against that, certainly, number one, we'll entertain any request for that list of attendees. And two, if there's an overwhelming consensus to just issue it, then we'll issue it. But we need some feedback. But number one, request it and we'll issue it to you.
I move we issue it.
Jerry says we have enough of a consensus. We'll go ahead and issue it to us. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Have you, since this is fairly new and you're going in, have you considered putting out a draft RFP, or are you just going to stick with it?
We considered it and decided that at this particular point in time that the benefits that we would get from that are outweighed by the necessity to move some of our people out of the buildings they're in. So
I got it.
That's the response to the question is, have we considered putting out a draft RFP? Yes, ma'am.
The monorail, maybe I missed it, but is the Army paying for that, or is that going to be a whole private effort as well?
The question is the monorail going to be paid for by the Army, or is that going to be a private effort as well? That's going to come out of the development itself. Instead of building us some square footage of office space, we will ask in that particular case to have those assets used to build a monorail. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
What's the planned occupancy date for phase 1?
1 October 1996, beginning. The question was, what's the planned occupancy for phase 1? Army office space, we want to start occupying our first building on 1 October 1996 and complete that movement by 31 March 1997. First tenant that we want to move into the Army space, and we're talking just the Army space. The first tenant is the Military Traffic Management Command out of the Columbia Pike building that they've got, the NASTF building. So that would be our first tenant. The last major tenant in that particular case is the Army Materiel Command, the occupants of that building on Eisenhower Avenue, and we want to complete their move by 31 March 1997. So we got a 6-month window. But on 1 October, we do expect to walk up and open the door to our first building. Yes, ma'am.
When would the monorail be operational?
We are now looking at the monorail being operational probably 6 to 8 years in phase 3, and we're on a 5-phase type project. Yes, sir.
Are there budgets formulated and congressional approved given for various dollars to move and asserting a certain lease rate, et cetera? Or your plans?
The question is I'm assuming that the people that we're planning on moving in, do we have congressional approvals and are the budget documents? The answer to all of those is yes. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Will part of the RFP package detail your general schedule for subsequent phases?
Will part of the RFP package detail the general schedule for subsequent phases? Jerry, you going to put that in?
Well, there's been a big argument within the Army, and we don't know how. First of all, I guess we need to know what type of value that would be to you. Is looking at this being over at least a 10-year phased process, but we're still not decided to answer the question. But maybe you can give us some input as to whether that would be valuable to you or not.
We are looking at doing the phases basically in 3- and 4-year increments as we go through. So we move into phase 1 in 96, 97, then we're looking at 3 to 4 years later to do phase 2 and so on and so forth. But as Jerry says, you need to tell us that that's of some value and explain it to us so we can consider it. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Does the package explain what the Army's involvement or the Corps' involvement will be through the design process, or is this just deliver the product and that's it on such and such a date?
The question is does the package, I assume you're referring to the RFP,
correct,
explain what the Corps or the Army's involvement will be during that particular process? And it is a design build, I think it does.
Well, the level, we won't go into a lot of internal processes as who's going to be doing what, but certainly by the time that a contract would be awarded, the successful contractor would have a full understanding of who all the players were and what their roles and responsibilities will be. But a lot of that's going to be determined by what the ultimate outcome is of what the Army buys.
Will they be involved in more than just the review process and the design process?
Who would say, sir?
They, the Corps of Engineers.
The Corps is going to be an active player with the project manager throughout the entire process. Again, not all roles and responsibilities have been totally defined at this time.
Okay. Is it also a 2-step process? Qualifications and then price?
No, not a 2-step. As per the Federal Acquisition Regulation, not a 2-step.
Yes, sir.
One of your first slides had sell, trade, or lease. Is there a general direction that the willow is bending in terms of the Army? Is it better to be a sell, better to be a trade barter, or there's no preference? Is it really and truly wide open in terms of setting up the RFP?
In terms of what the question is, sell, trade, or lease, are we leaning one way or the other?
I'm trying to find a basis for the legal element of how it's going to work, because a lot of the financing is going to predicate from that point of how it's going to be handled.
We are basically we've eliminated the trade in this particular case option, And we're working on either transfer the title to the land to the private sector or do a long-term lease in that particular case, whichever the financing works out best on.
Does that apply? Each phase will have its own generic approach to this. For this first phase, it's sell or lease.
That's where we're in. That's correct. And what we learn out of the first phase is what we will in fact apply to the second, third, and fourth, because it is going to be a learning process. Yes, sir.
Does the Army intend to require any low disadvantage and minority business enterprise?
The question is, does the Army intend to require any disadvantage? Jerry?
We are going to be adhering to our national policies of certainly seeing that a portion or set aside, as we say, are incorporate small business and small disadvantaged business concerns. Because of the dollar threshold of the anticipated contract, you will be required to submit a subcontracting plan.
Under a MILCON contract, you're limited.
Can you stand up, please? So we can.
Under a military construction contract for design build, you're limited to a fixed price type contract only. Will this design build contract fall under the same limitations, or will you look at other contract forms?
The question is under MILCON, we're limited to certain fixed price guidelines. And will this contract fall under those guidelines, or will we look at some other forms?
There's only two ways to do business: firm fixed price or cost reimbursement. At this time, we don't anticipate going cost reimbursement.
Anyone else?
Did you also state anything about whether it's just spec office building or whether the interiors and programming are part of the contract?
Do we also specify whether it's spec office building and the interiors of the buildings are also included?
Correct. Is interiors and programming part of the contract with you?
Yes.
Can you
Yes, sir.
repeat the list of tenants in phase one and their various respective square footages?
That will be provided as part of the RFP. Question is, can we have a list of the phase one tenants? We are building, and we are asking to have built, generic open bay office space so that the tenant in particular is not in fact driving the type of office space. In an era of downsizing, which is what the Department of Defense is in, we've got to be able to move the ABC agency in today and tomorrow the DEF agency. So we're building generic type office space. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Necessary to get Fairfax County approval on the way traffic is going to be handled, and if so, has that been obtained yet?
The question is it necessary to get Fairfax County approval on the way traffic is going to be handled yet? And if so, has that been obtained yet? The answer is yes, and the answer to the second portion of that is yes, too. We have worked that issue with the county. We will probably have one of the few projects that goes through the county that is incurred in by the staff as well as the Board of Supervisors by the time we go through the formal process. At least that's what they told us last week. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Can you elaborate on the number of drawings that you're going to expect in the design build process? If there's going to be models required to the level that you're going to ask us to submit?
The question is, can we elaborate on the number of drawings that we're going to be required in the design build process, or are they going to be model required? The answer is no, I can't at this particular point in time. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Would you repeat the public law section? I got 101, 189, and what was the other?
I think you'll find it's in the market survey as well. If not, then we will give you that citation before you leave. All right, can you pick that up off the chart, please? Anyone else? Yes, sir.
The affordable housing component, how do you expect to work that out?
The question is the affordable housing component, how do we expect to work that out? We work that out with the county in terms of their ordinance and what they propose for this particular development. It's Public Law 101-189, Section 2821. (1990). Anyone else? Any other questions? Sir, that concludes the briefing in that particular case. Thank you all very much for attending.